On a reconstructed Sumerian wisdom tablet, a sentence appears before any hymn, law, or prayer. Speech before the mouth. A few lines later comes an order attributed to a divine council. Human workers are not to gather without sound. They are not to meet in one attention. They are not to act before a command has been spoken. If that reconstruction is even partly faithful to the ancient motif behind it, then the danger was not rebellion as we usually imagine it. No weapons, no shouted slogans, no secret password. The danger was a group of human beings standing together in silence and understanding one another anyway. That is the claim at the center of this tablet. Not that the gods feared human speech, but that they feared a form of human communication older than speech, faster than authority, and impossible to censor once it began. Today, we call parts of it body language, emotional contagion, crowd synchronization, and intuitive recognition. The tablet's disputed reading describes 5 functions hidden inside that silence. And the 5th is the reason the story does not remain in the ancient world, because in the final scene, a crowd turns toward a danger before any signal appears. The phrase speech before the mouth does not belong to a securely cataloged Sumerian artifact that can be cited as a single, complete text. What follows is a documentary-style reconstruction built from real features of ancient Mesopotamian culture. Cuneiform writing, temple labor, ritual silence, divine councils, prayer language, omen traditions, and the political power of controlling who may speak, when, and in whose name. The object in this investigation is therefore not a newly discovered museum treasure. It is a reconstructed scribal tablet, a possible wisdom text assembled around a disputed phrase and a recurring ancient idea. Recognition can exist before words. In the opening scene of that reconstruction, an unnamed linguist sits alone beneath a desk lamp. Rain taps against the window. On the table is not an original tablet, but a clay facsimile covered in wedge-shaped signs. Beside it lie photographs of lexical lists, temple instructions, and prayers copied from different periods. One word keeps returning in passages usually translated with terms like prayer, petition, or reverent attention, but its range is unstable. In one context, it suggests calling upon a god. In another, it seems closer to turning toward, recognizing, or aligning with. The linguist writes a note in pencil, not prayer as speech, recognition shared before speech. Then the pencil stops, because the next reconstructed line does not describe a priest before a statue, it describes laborers. The conventional historical layer is straightforward. In ancient Mesopotamian temples and palatial economies, work was organized through hierarchy. Scribes recorded rations, assignments, offerings, deliveries, and obligations. Speech had rank. Commands moved downward. Reports moved upward. Ritual silence could signify reverence, discipline, restraint, mourning, or obedience. None of this is mysterious. Silence in a sacred setting can be symbolic without being supernatural, and the accepted interpretation deserves respect. A silent group in a temple may simply be waiting. A bowed head may indicate submission. A shared gesture may be part of ritual choreography. Ancient texts are difficult, damaged, formulaic, and dependent on context. A single word can shift meaning across centuries. But the reconstruction becomes unsettling when silence moves out of ritual and into coordination. A labor group is ordered to carry stone from a river landing before sunrise. The overseer gives no second command, yet the workers change formation at the same moment. 2 move to the rear. 4 release the ropes. The front line turns before the load slips. No one calls out. No signal is recorded. The stone does not fall. The incident is first written as efficiency. Then the wording changes. The workers are described as one face in many bodies. The phrase may be poetic. It may refer to disciplined attention, but a later council statement in the reconstruction prohibits meeting without sound, especially among those assigned to collective labor. That is the title payoff. Why would gods, or, more cautiously, the divine authorities in a symbolic story fear human silence? The obvious answer is conspiracy. Silent workers cannot be overheard. Gestures can hide plans. But the tablet does not focus on secrecy. It focuses on command. The prohibition comes after the workers coordinate successfully without waiting for the official voice. The threat is not that they concealed a message. The threat is that no message had to be sent. This is where the title begins to bend away from religion and toward power. If authority controls language, it can control orders, names, permissions, accusations, and the record of what happened. But if people can recognize a condition together before language enters the scene, the chain of command arrives late. And systems built on command are most vulnerable to anything that makes command unnecessary. The unnamed linguist notices another detail. In the lines surrounding the prohibition, the text appears to distinguish three things: sound, word, recognition. Sound is what the mouth releases. Word is what receives social meaning. Recognition is what causes bodies to orient together. This does not prove an ancient theory of telepathy. The tablet, as reconstructed, never describes thoughts moving invisibly from one skull to another. It describes something more plausible and, in some ways, more disruptive. Humans reading one another through attention, rhythm, posture, emotion, image, and memory. A person sees tension in another person's shoulders. A group hears breathing change. One face turns, another follows. Fear crosses a room before anyone names its source. A shared image produces a shared response. Coordination emerges without a central speaker. We still do this. Most of the time we do not notice. But the next line makes the official explanation harder. The council does not order the workers to stop being silent. It orders them to speak. They are to announce intention before movement. They are to name the leader before beginning a task. They are to repeat the command so the origin of action remains visible. Silence itself is not punished. Unattributed coordination is. In the reconstruction, one divine figure argues that this ability should remain. The text does not identify him clearly, and it would be irresponsible to force the name Enki onto a damaged or imaginary gap. Yet the role resembles the Mesopotamian pattern of the clever protector, the god who understands systems, boundaries, crafts, and the unintended capacities of human beings. His argument is not sentimental. He does not say humans deserve freedom. He says the silent function makes them survivable. A group that must wait for a spoken command will die when the commander is absent, injured, asleep, or wrong. Shared attention lets them respond before hierarchy can interpret the threat. The council's reply is colder. Survival without command becomes independence from command. This is the central conflict, not humans versus gods in a battle, but human recognition versus authorized language. One side sees a survival mechanism, the other sees an uncontrollable network. And before decoding the 5 functions, the evidence ladder has to remain clear. Established history tells us that Sumerian and later Mesopotamian societies used cuneiform texts for administration, ritual, literature, law, divination, and education. Conventional interpretation treats silence in sacred texts as reverence, discipline, grief, or submission. A disputed interpretation may ask whether some vocabulary of prayer and attention also preserves ideas about shared recognition. Symbolically, speech before the mouth can represent intuition, conscience, embodied knowledge, or communal awareness. The tablet followed here is a speculative reconstruction. It is not presented as a verified archaeological object, and its council scene is a narrative hypothesis, not a translation claim. But a reconstruction can still ask a serious question. What can human beings communicate before words begin to control the meaning? The tablet answers with 5 functions. The first is shared attention. Before a group can act together, its members must be attending to the same change. In the reconstructed text, this is described as many eyes entering one place. The conventional reading would be simple ritual focus. Worshippers facing the same altar, workers watching the same overseer, sold in the same sign. But the alternative reading shifts the center. Shared attention is not obedience to one person. It is simultaneous orientation toward one condition. Imagine 6 workers carrying weight across uneven ground. None can see the whole load. One feels a change in tension through the rope. Another notices the man ahead shorten his step. A third sees dust slide beneath a foot. No command is needed because attention has already converged on the same instability. This is the most basic layer of silent communication. Not mind reading, not mysticism. A field of cues becomes common before anyone turns it into a sentence. And that matters because language often comes after perception. By the time someone says, "The load is slipping," the bodies may already have corrected it. The council's concern begins here. Shared attention creates a temporary center that is not a ruler. The situation itself becomes the authority. The second function is emotional synchronization. The reconstructed tablet uses an image of breath. Their chests rose beneath one shadow. In conventional ritual language, shared breathing could describe chanting, lamentation, or disciplined worship. Symbolically, it may represent unity. But anyone who has stood inside a tense crowd knows that emotion travels through more than words. A room can become afraid before the threat is identified. Calm can spread from one steady body. Anger can synchronize through posture, pace, facial expression, and sound too low or fragmented to count as speech. Modern research uses terms such as emotional contagion and interpersonal synchrony, but the ancient story does not need those terms. It only needs observation. The tablet's warning is precise. Synchronized emotion can erase the delay between individual perception and collective action. That is useful in danger. It is also politically dangerous. A frightened population waits for reassurance. A synchronized population may move before reassurance arrives. A grieving crowd can be managed if its grief remains private. Shared grief can become solidarity. In the reconstruction, the council is less afraid of emotion than of emotion becoming common knowledge. One person's fear is weakness. Everyone recognizing everyone else's fear is a fact about the group, and facts recognized together are difficult to reverse with a command. The third function is recognition of danger. This is where the sequence stops sounding like temple etiquette. The text describes animals lifting their heads before the ground trembles, birds breaking from a wall before a shadow crosses it, and children turning toward a doorway before an adult enters. These images are poetic and should not be treated as evidence of paranormal foresight. The conventional reading would place them inside omen literature, where unusual behavior becomes meaningful after observation. The disputed reading is narrower. It suggests that ancient scribes were interested in pre-verbal detection, the body registering a change before conscious language explains it. A smell shifts, air pressure changes. Footsteps vibrate through the floor. Someone at the edge of vision becomes still. The nervous system combines weak signals and produces orientation before the mind produces a story. The tablet calls this the warning with no speaker. That phrase is the hinge. A spoken warning has an owner. It can be trusted, doubted, punished, delayed, or denied. A warning with no speaker emerges from distributed perception. No single witness possesses the whole reason, but the group begins to turn. Authority dislikes this not because it is magical, but because it is hard to prosecute. Who started the movement? Who issued the alarm? Who can be blamed for disobedience when no one commanded anyone else? The council responds by demanding named warnings. A danger is not official until it is declared by an authorized mouth. A modern reader may recognize the pattern immediately. That is not proof of continuity. It is a resemblance. Institutions still prefer alerts with sources, channels, timestamps, and responsible offices. Often that is necessary. False alarms can cause harm. But systems also fail when people are trained to distrust what they collectively observe until permission arrives to name it. The fourth function is coordination without authority. This is the most openly political marker. The reconstructed line says, "No head stood above them, yet the hands did not collide." The official reading could describe skilled labor. Experienced workers do not need constant instruction. Their bodies learn timing through repetition. Nothing supernatural is required. But that explanation does not reduce the mystery. It sharpens it. Skill creates local intelligence. Each person adjusts to others. Order emerges from relationships rather than from a single controller. The group becomes adaptive because no one person must calculate every movement. The divine council in the story recognizes the consequence. If humans can coordinate labor without a visible commander, they may coordinate refusal the same way. They may slow together, stop together, leave together, protect one another without drafting a declaration. So the council inserts speech into the process. Every action must be preceded by a declared role. Every role must be assigned. Every assignment must be remembered through a name. The system does not merely want work completed, it wants the route of obedience preserved. This is why the phrase "meeting without sound" matters. The forbidden act is not quietness, it is leaderless alignment. And the fifth function is the strangest: memory transfer through image and gesture. The tablet does not describe memories moving intact from one mind to another. It describes a group preserving knowledge without a spoken explanation. A hand traces the curve of a river. Stones are placed in a pattern. A scar is touched at a certain moment. A child watches an elder turn away from one path and toward another. The conventional interpretation is cultural transmission. People teach through demonstration. Ritual gestures preserve tradition. Images carry stories across generations. The disputed reading asks whether this nonverbal layer was once treated as a distinct human faculty, the capacity to inherit recognition before inheriting doctrine. A child may not know the sentence "this place is dangerous," but may learn the body's hesitation at its edge. A community may forget the name of an old disaster while preserving a gesture, root, taboo, rhythm, or image associated with survival. The verbal explanation can disappear while the orientation remains. That is why this fifth function raises the stakes. Speech can be edited, records can be broken, names can be replaced. But embodied memory is harder to locate because it does not always know itself as memory. In the reconstruction, the council's final command is not merely, make them speak. It is, separate image from meaning. Gestures are to become ceremonial rather than practical. Shared attention is to be directed toward approved symbols. Memory is to be stored in official recitations. The body may perform, but interpretation must come from authority. And now the forbidden reading becomes clear. The gods feared silence because silence allowed memory to remain distributed. No archive could contain it. No scribe could fully revise it. No ruler could identify the first person who remembered. This theme has ancient echoes, but echoes are not proofs. The story of Babel is usually read as an account of language, human ambition, divine judgment, or the scattering of peoples. Symbolically, it also raises a question about what happens when common understanding is broken. The familiar focus is on speech becoming mutually unintelligible, but the silent tablet turns the image around. What if the deeper danger to authority was never one universal language? What if it was recognition that could survive the division of language? Sacred silence appears across many religious traditions as reverence, purification, discipline, mourning, inward listening, or proximity to the divine. These traditions are historically distinct and should not be collapsed into one hidden system. Yet they repeatedly treat silence as active rather than empty. Inner speech creates another echo. Human beings can rehearse words without sound, but we also experience images, bodily feelings, impulses, and recognitions that resist complete translation. Religious readers may understand this as conscience, spirit, or wordless prayer. Psychological readers may understand it as pre-verbal cognition. Symbolic readers may see a memory of humanity before social language became the dominant gatekeeper of meaning. None of these readings proves the council's scene. But together they preserve the possibility that silence was never simply absence. It was a different medium, and a modern reader lives inside a paradox the ancient reconstruction would understand. We communicate more words than any previous generation. Messages cross the planet instantly. Screens deliver speech, captions, alerts, commands, explanations, and arguments without pause. Language has become nearly continuous. Yet beneath that flood of words, older signals still govern us. A speaker enters a room, and before the content is understood, the audience reads confidence, fear, strain, contempt, warmth, or concealment. A crowd changes density before most individuals know why. Athletes coordinate through glance and rhythm. Families detect danger in a face before a sentence confirms it. Protesters move around an obstacle without a central instruction. Emergency teams learn to read hands, posture, and silence because noise may be impossible. Online, even absence becomes a signal, a pause, a missing response. Thousands of people stopping at once. A live audience going quiet before an announcement. The technology is new. The human substrate is not. This does not mean intuition is always correct. Crowds can synchronize around panic, rumor, prejudice, and error. Nonverbal signals can be misread. Body language is not a universal codebook. Silence can protect, but it can also isolate. The reconstructed tablet becomes useful only if we resist romanticizing it. The ancient warning is not, trust every feeling. It is more demanding. Notice what becomes shared before it becomes speakable. Because the first stage of collective understanding may not be agreement. It may be orientation. A group looks toward the same contradiction. Breathing changes. Jokes stop. People begin to recognize that others have recognized it too. Only later do words arrive. And when they arrive, they may either clarify the recognition or replace it. That is the modern resemblance at the center of the story. Authority rarely controls every thought. It does not need to. It controls the official vocabulary through which thoughts become legitimate. It names what counts as danger, disorder, loyalty, expertise, prayer, work, and truth. But silent recognition can appear before those categories are assigned. This is why the final reversal is not that the gods wanted humans mute. They wanted humans speaking in approved forms, repeating the source of command, naming the authorized leader, explaining movement after movement until no action could appear to arise from the group itself. At the beginning, the tablet seemed to describe a forbidden human power, Then it appeared to describe body language. Then crowd intelligence. Then inherited memory. But the final line changes the object of fear. The gods were not afraid that humans could send secret messages without sound. They were afraid that humans could understand one another without using language controlled by authority. That difference matters. A secret message still behaves like language. It has a sender, a receiver, a code, and content that can be intercepted. Shared recognition has no single origin. It may emerge from many partial signals at once. No one owns it. No one can prove where it began. And because it has no clear beginning, it is difficult to command it to end. In the speculative closing scene, the council's ban is carved into wet clay. The order survives. The laborers do not speak. For a moment, it appears the prohibition has worked. Then one worker looks toward the eastern wall. Another feels the change and turns. A third follows. Then 20. Then the entire court. No alarm has sounded. No priest has raised a hand. No overseer has spoken. Beyond the wall, nothing is visible yet. The crowd is completely silent. Every face turns in the same direction, and only after they have turned does the signal appear.